The United States is conducting more intense, targeted strikes with devastating combat power with each passing day to destroy the threat posed by the Iranian terrorist regime. It's no surprise that we are seeing the remaining elements of the regime become increasingly eager to end the destruction and come to the negotiating table while they still can.
White House Press Secretary today, Pakistan continues to work toward a mediation role in the conflict between U.S. and Iran. Joining us tonight, Pakistan's ambassador to the U.S., Rizwan Saeed Sheikh. Mr. Ambassador, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You know, we're trying to get a granular feel about where these negotiations stand or where they may be going. Your country is trying to play host. Where do you see it tonight?
Well, essentially, we have to look at the backdrop because it is in the context of both countries and even the broader regional countries placing their confidence in Pakistan to conduct this facilitation, for which we are certainly grateful. But we are also mindful of the fact that it is not an easy process. It's a very complicated matter with too many moving pieces, economic, political, you know. We are all in the world looking at the situation presented by the closure of Strait of Hormuz. There are other political implications that continue to unfold as we speak with Pakistan, in keeping with its long-standing tradition of believing not only for itself in dialogue and diplomacy, but offering it previously. I mean, look at the premier example of Pakistan brokering rapprochement between China and United States in early 70s, which is certainly a primary example. Imagine two top economies of the world not talking to each other had it not been for Pakistan. So we're emboldened by that, and this recent offer of Pakistan and placement of confidence in Pakistan is based on this good intent, which has been joined in by other regional countries as well. Yesterday, there were 3 foreign ministers in Pakistan, hosted by our Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister. Our Prime Minister has been working up phones with the global leadership. So we are trying to create the conducive setting for this dialogue to take place.
Do you think that you have the right people involved in Iran as far as the negotiation? There's some question about who the U.S. is kind of going through as far as the decision-making on the ground in Iran. First of all, who are you working with here in the U.S., and how is it going with the people in Iran?
Well, Brett, as I said, there are multiple challenges here, too many moving pieces. So there are multiple channels of communication as well that are in play as we speak, different levels of engagement. Prime Minister is on it, Deputy Prime Minister is on it. There are other mechanisms which are contacting their respective counterparts. And in terms of the who exactly dealing part we are dealing with is the fact that the confidence building measure demonstrated in movement of ships that were allowed, 8 in the first instance and now another 20 in the second instance, is not just a concept of operation, but a proof of concept that has been implemented to induce confidence in the system, which has to be a prerequisite for commencement of the actual negotiation procedure, but contexts are in place.
Yeah, and the president touted that the other day, the 20 ships going through. What do you think your timeline is here? Do you have a timeline?
Well, much as everybody would want this, the hostilities at least to form in themselves a confidence building measure and end, diplomacy is a gradual process. It takes a lot of patient politics that has to morph into deft diplomacy that needs to be conducted here. But we should get things moving in the interest of the broader region faster, we hope, and we are optimistic.
But you see the president's Truth Social posts. I mean, he kind of puts a deadline on it before major strikes on electric generating plants, oil wells, Karg Island. He's making some pretty significant timelines here for the Iranians to answer the call for diplomacy.
Certainly, but let's look at the fact that Iran is a war-torn country with the communication channels certainly disrupted. and it is not even easy to get responses in a good time from the system that currently is in place there. So you would have noticed that these deadlines have been extended in the past, in recent past, and we are working religiously with regard to the current deadline. But of course, the process will take its own due course, and while Pakistan continues to be the facilitator, it is actually upon the conflicting parties themselves to not only create the prerequisites for negotiations and to be able to conduct them in all earnest, but they will have to take the decisions which make it successful.
Yeah, Pakistan and Iran share a 565-mile border, so you're right next to each other. You know, back in 2019, I talked to the former now Pakistani Prime Minister about the possibility of a nuclear Iran. Take a listen. Do you think Iran wants a nuclear weapon?
I can't say about Iran wanting a nuclear weapon, but as a neighbor of Iran, we certainly hope that this does not become a full-blown conflict.
And what are you doing? Can you help with the transit of ships or the?
You know, we would love to help if obviously we were asked, because we are a neighbor of Iran.
Wanting to be a part of that. I should point out Imran Khan has been in prison since August of 2023, serving multiple sentences for convictions, including corruption. He denies that, saying it's politically motivated. But all the way back then, you saw a role as being a mediator, or at least he talked about that. Your hope, now that there is continued fighting, the Houthis in the neighborhood saying that they're going to get into kinetic action and have over the Red Sea, how much does that complicate things?
Well, there, as we discussed, are too many moving pieces already, and there are other elements that can complicate things. But the whole idea is to not to give way to more hostilities, but in the first instance, as a prerequisite for negotiation process to take place, try and end hostilities that can lend the necessary diplomatic space for discussion on the substance.
So you're looking for a ceasefire?
I think in any negotiation process, that would be a good thing to start with, but it is, of course, upon the conflicting parties to reach an understanding there and indicate something good on that score.
I want to turn, Pakistan and Afghanistan have been trading fire as you're preparing to host potentially these talks about U.S. and Iran. Where is that? You've traded heavy fire, and both sides say there's a temporary pause in the fighting there between Islamabad and Kabul.
Well, as I said, Pakistan believes in dialogue and diplomacy. We have been conducting that since the new government, after the withdrawal of forces, took charge in Afghanistan. We have been pointing out the exact locations from which those terrorist attacks in Pakistan were being conducted. We are the now officially authentic largest victim country of terrorism anywhere in the world, with the average of almost 3 incidents per day. So we could not have taken it beyond a point. And since they, despite repeated reminders, sharing of coordinates, did not take action and said that perhaps it is not within their means, their capacity, or their control, we had to take action. We could not sit back and wait for the next terrorist attack. And in this case, it is way, way too different, because dialogue, diplomacy has been afforded more than 4 years. And now we are only targeting those areas for which coordinates were repeatedly shared. And there is mounting evidence that not only that this terrorism is taking place, it is state-sponsored terrorism from our neighborhood. India is sponsoring terrorism. We have clear fingerprints in our
The president touts his efforts between India and Pakistan. Obviously, there's a lot of hope up on Capitol Hill and here that the U.S. and Iran see some diplomatic solution through your country. So, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for the time.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Follow it.
Good to see you again.
Be sure to like and subscribe for all the Fox News latest on YouTube, and catch full shows streaming now on Fox One.